What is up, everybody? I'm back with a little bit of an update on the Ashes of Creation Intrepid Studios legal front. You've probably noticed that we're hitting a little bit of a slowdown in the pace of our videos. This is largely due to where we're at just within the legal side of things in the American sort of legal system. Everything just has slowed down, so there's just not a lot to be reporting on at this point. But I do want to bring us a little bit up to date on where we're at with some of the temporary restraining order filings that have been going on. We did have a motion put forth by TFE Games to dissolve the California TRO, and there was a motion made on that not too long ago. So I wanted to just give you a little bit of an update there. But before I forget, Steven, I'm back from my 7-day Discord ban. I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you for that 7 days of not getting to touch the Ashes of Creation Discord. It really freed up my mind. I appreciate it greatly. As we move on, as always, any legal documents will be put in the description below, so certainly go check them out for yourself, and do not trust me, bro. So to bring a lot of you back up to date where we're at, or if you just don't know when you're joining, we've had two different TROs or temporary restraining orders filed. One in Nevada from TFE Games against Stephen Sharif, one in California of Stephen Sharif against TFE Games. Well, both were okayed by judges. So they're kind of obviously at opposition to each other. And where we have been, the Nevada is actually a few steps ahead in terms of time. And the judge there decided to postpone their hearing until the California judge heard a motion to dissolve the TRO made by TFE Games in that state. Well, that's kind of where we're at. So I do want to go over kind of where some of the disagreements are. When you look at Stephen Sharif versus Dawson and TFE Games, kind of what is the fight over? What is the legal process? And well, one of the big things is going to be, was the foreclosure legal? The other is, was there an actual real sale process? You know, did they actually sell the company per standards? Another was there proper notice given? So under a lot of the legal side of things, you're actually supposed to give notice to, one, the company, and two, anyone that has any sort of investment or lien on the company. So there's questions there. And with that, was the sale fair? And also there's some question against who has majority versus minority ownership, and how does that fit in? Again, for those of you who are unaware, Stephen Sharif reportedly has only about 5% of Intrepid Studios. And then from there, there's also this very big question over jurisdiction. As I've mentioned, we have Nevada and we have California with ongoing legal actions in both states. So those are some of the bigger sides to this argument that just happened against this motion to dissolve the TRO. All right, so we're going to start with the question of, was the foreclosure legal? Because this is one of the big arguments that Stephen Sharif has been putting forward as to whether TFE Games should even own the Intrepid Studios property or assets. And so there's obviously two different positions here. TFE claims that, of course, they did an Article 9 foreclosure and that it was all legal. They stated that, Intrepid Studios defaulted, and thus they had the right to take the assets. And they're again claiming that the sale was legal and that it was commercially reasonable, which is a definable thing within California code. And with that, of course, Stephen Sharif on the other side of things is stating that no, the foreclosure was not legal. It was effective by statute. And some of the violations that they're claiming happened were no proper notice was given, there was no public sale, it was all done privately, and that there was improper private purchase that occurred from Dawson to Dawson. And their core argument of this is really, you didn't follow the law. So the sale of the studio is invalid. So the key part to this discussion or argument comes down to just that. Did they follow the law or not? On one hand, you have TFE Games stating, yes, they did, giving a lot of evidence as to why they think they did. On the other, you have Stephen Sharif saying, no, you didn't, along with what they cite as far as their legal precedent as well. Again, check it out in the description. The documents are there. The next one is another interesting piece of information because it actually brought out some new information that we didn't really know before. And that's this question of, was there a real sale process? And so the big claim here from TFE Games is that, yes, there was. They actually claimed that for a period of 1 year, they worked with an investment banking group called Areem & Company, looking for investors or buyers of the game, of the studio. And they claimed that they had 0 interested parties during that full year. So they're basically stating that, yes, we attempted to actually sell this through a normal process and nobody wanted it. And then we look at Stephen Sharif's response to this, and he basically says, that's a little bit misleading. He does acknowledge that they worked with Areem. In fact, he actually mentions that they were looking for a publisher with Areem and investors way back in like 2022. And he states that this work with Areem and company was to raise funding, not to sell the company. So they question whether that meant it was a real sale process or not. And they go to further on state that when foreclosure was happening, yes, Areem was notified, but not until very late in the process, and also not in a way they think that was meant to attract buyers. So one of the main key takeaways here again is that Stephen Sharif is on one hand stating that you actually did not have a sale process that occurred in what would be considered normal, real way, while you have TFE Games stating, no, we actually did. We tested the market with a respectable company, this Areem and company, and we couldn't find anyone interested in buying it. Then we come to this idea of, was there a proper notice given? Again, under California code, when you're doing this process, you have to notify 1, the company, Intrepid Studios, and 2, anyone that owns any kind of stake in that, any kind of lien. We looked at these UCC claims as an example a lot in the past. Commerce West Bank is one that comes to mind very clearly here as a primary position holder within the company. So according to California code, you do have to notify everyone about this. And that is a big question here. Did that notification actually occur? And of course, you have 2 different arguments, as you would find in a legal proceeding. On one hand, you have TFE Games stating, yes, everyone absolutely knew this was happening. They actually go on to further state and claim that even Stephen Sharif knew and that he was actually involved in the process. And so he did have notice, and so did Intrepid Studios. There is some question about Commerce West Bank that's not really talked about too much, but TFE claims that that also really would not affect this process. And then you have Stephen Sharif basically stating all of that is flat out false. And claiming that there was absolutely no formal notice given to Intrepid or to Commerce West Bank, even though it was needed. Even worse, Stephen Sharif is sort of claiming that this was intentional, that this was a workaround in order to get out from under Intrepid and into a new TFE Games Studios company. So with that, one of the main, again, key takeaways from this argument is you have TFE Games stating, hey, everyone knew, and you have Stephen Sharif saying, no, we did not know. You did not get proper notification. And again, that's important because when you look at California code for this foreclosure process, this Article 9, you do have to give proper notice to all of the stakeholders. And so that's another big part of the question here. And then there's the question of, was this sale fair or was it rigged? And here TFE Games stating, no, look, we actually did go out. We tried to get buyers and there was none that existed. We really had no alternative. They state Intrepid was debt, just laden with debt. They didn't have any way out from under where they were. There really was no other outcome that could be good for the studio. And thus they felt like the sale was reasonable because of that. And then of course you have Stephen Sharif on the other hand, stating that he actually claims at least 1 buyer was interested. Again, name will be in the description. Not going to put it here. A lot of the documents that got linked actually have some personal information in them, phone numbers, addresses, emails. So I'm not going to visually post them up here, but they are in the public documents. If you're interested in who it was, I actually read the text message that it was cited here. I don't know that it exactly reads to me like there was a buyer. It sounds like somebody basically saying, hey, if you have no other options, I'll talk to you about possibilities. But Stephen Sharif is claiming that that meant there was at least 1 interested buyer. And from that, claiming that they were excluded from this process. And again, that meant that it was not a fair sale because he claims this interested party was excluded from that. And so, they basically go on to say it was a closed private sale, which again is sort of against what is supposed to happen when you have an Article 9 foreclosure. So again, the big takeaway from this question, TFE is stating, hey, there were no buyers and we had no other alternatives here. Stephen Sharif say, no, I actually did have at least one buyer that you were aware of. And, we did not pursue that. Then there's this question of who has control, who's majority ownership, who's minority ownership, and what do they want? This is something that I actually kind of fall back to when I have conversations about this, that, hey, even if it is ruled TFE Games obtained Intrepid Studios assets improperly, Intrepid still has a majority ownership that doesn't want the studio apparently to stay open, versus Stephen's 5% wanting it to apparently continue development. And so here again, the TFE claims is that Stephen Sharif only owns about 4.9% of the studio at this point, and that all of the majority of the stakeholders, the shareholders, they all support this restructuring and movement into the TFE Games holdings. It's somewhere around, I want to say 70% is what they're claiming, and like 72% of the debt holders. But here, Stephen's argument is it's really not about voting power at this point. It's about this supposed reported illegal potential conduct of selling Intrepid Studios assets to TFE Games through this Article 9 sale, this foreclosure sale. And, basically he's stating it doesn't matter if the majority wants this because it was not above board. It violated foreclosure law. So it really doesn't matter what they want. Is kind of what the argument boils down to there. And then lastly, is this sort of Nevada versus California jurisdiction issue, which has been very interesting to see play out. Again, the first TRO was actually against Stephen Sharif by TFE Games. That was approved in Nevada first. And then this California TRO is basically the reverse, was approved after the fact. And so there is this sort of competing who gets to go first. They call it the first to file rule, which is sort of this guidelines in a federal level that states often also follow, that says, hey, basically it says Nevada filed first, so they should get to go first, and California should come after that, or come last, basically, is one of TFE's arguments for this. And they're basically stating that this California judge should defer to Nevada, in that Nevada has jurisdiction, and they're prepared to show that Stephen Sharif and John Moore actually did operate in Nevada, despite what they say. And so they feel pretty confident that that's going to occur there. And here, of course, Stephen Sharif's counter argument is that it's really irrelevant to this motion. This whole TRO is about ownership of the studios and trade secrets. It really has nothing to do with jurisdiction. And so, even if jurisdiction was a question, they basically are arguing that it's still necessary for this California TRO to exist. And again, the key takeaway here is that TFE is stating that this belongs in Nevada, whereas Stephen Sharif is saying, no, that doesn't really matter. One, they disagree that it belongs in Nevada. They actually feel pretty strongly that the Nevada judge will side on their behalf and that this should be in California. Who knows what actually happens there? But they're basically stating it doesn't really matter anyways. So then that gets us to the ruling. A lot of words to get to one little final statement. This actually, I've been waiting to publish this video because I was wanting to get the judge's actual full statement out there, full opinion, because I really wanted to see what the rationale was. As of right now, that still has not been published. So it might not be. I think there will be, but I figured I'd go ahead and make this video anyways. Essentially, the judge ruled against the motion to dissolve the TRO, and basically has gone forward with establishing a hearing for a preliminary injunction to come later. And again, just as a refresher, this preliminary injunction hearing, what it's mainly for is to consider whether or not to make this temporary restraining order more permanent during this whole litigation process. That was originally supposed to happen first, and then we had this motion that got effectively put in its place to dissolve. And now that that motion has been denied, they're going to move forward with the preliminary injunction hearing. which, by the way, actually, there's another one of those in the Nevada case that will come up first. So there are a few other things that I thought were super interesting that we hadn't really heard a whole lot of before, just to comment on them. One is TFE claiming that Tim Sharif, Stephen's brother, was actually a deal broker for Stephen Sharif through this whole process. They even go on to state that this 310 Nutrition Company, which Tim Sharif owns, supposedly received a $1.3 million loan, I guess, from Intrepid for unknown reasons that is claimed to have not been repaid at this point. And also, I mentioned it before, but I wanted to highlight this again. Stephen Sharif has stated that they were in fact looking for publishers back in 2022. I will let you internet sleuths go back and see whether or not that was actually commented on publicly, or whether or not we were being fed other things to believe. TFE Games is also claiming that they were actually in the middle of restarting development when this California TRO was issued. Their claim was that they were hiring vendors to restart game development. Is that true? Is it not? I have no idea. But it was a comment that was made in the papers that were filed. And then lastly, another part that gets missed in this, TFE Games is claiming that Commerce West actually has withheld $1.1 million of the profit of the house sale that Stephen Sharif made when he sold his house. They're claiming that this was sort of leverage, or this was something he had put up collateral-wise for some of these loans. Their claim is that him going to Steam and notifying Commerce West about this Steam money that then was taken by Commerce West. TFE is claiming that this was done in order to try to recoup or because of that $1.1 million that Commerce West took of the home sale. Again, this will all be litigated. I have no idea what's true or not, but that I thought was an interesting comment that was made in some of their legal filings. Two other things I wanted to quickly mention. One, unfortunately, the very first class action lawsuit by one of the employees has been voluntarily dismissed. We still have the other one that is still active, but one of those lawsuits was dismissed by the person that brought it. The other thing I want to mention, funny little side story to this, literally the day before this hearing on this motion to dissolve the TRO in California, there was a motion by Stephen's lawyers to actually disqualify or remove the lawyer for TFE due to conflict of interest. They basically were stating that this lawyer that TFE Games is using acted like Stephen Sharif's lawyer in the past and talked about very relevant things to the ongoing legal proceedings. There was apparently never like a contract signed or anything like that, but regardless, their claim was legal advice was given, and here now the same lawyer is giving legal advice to TFE Games, and so there's a conflict of interest. I think this was literally the day before this hearing. The judge denied that, basically stating, what it sounded like to me was, look, you've known about this. You're putting this in front of me the day before as just a way to sort of mess with this process. That's how I read that. I could be wrong, but again, documents will be in the description. You can go check it out yourself. I just thought that was humorous that they tried to get the lawyer removed and were unsuccessful in that process. So, all right, what comes up? What are we looking forward to in the future? Kind of when can you expect some more videos from me or anyone else? Well, the next big thing I've mentioned is the Nevada preliminary injunction hearing. That is on the 26th of this month, so March 26th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. That will be a big hearing. So again, that was postponed in order to see what the ruling was in the California court about this motion to dissolve. And so now that that motion has been denied, I think we'll see some pretty interesting comments or commentary decisions, even maybe, coming from this Nevada hearing on the 26th. And then not long after that, California, the California preliminary injunction will be on the 2nd of April. So that also is coming up pretty quickly here. That'll be at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So I'll probably put on a video or put together a video for you after the April 2nd hearing, unless something big happens during the 26th, which could happen. But that will probably be about the next time you see a video from me. So again, apologies for the slow sort of rollout at this point. We started hot. Things have slowed down as we get into the legal process. So, but I am trying to put other stuff out there as well. We're going to start a whole series on behavioral mental side of gaming. For those of you who are unaware, I am a physician in the sort of behavioral health, mental health space. I think that might be kind of interesting to jump into for you all. So certainly let me know if you agree. And always, if you're interested in this case or just video games in general, give me a follow if you're not, and share this video for me, as that does help. And yeah, we will see what comes forward with these cases as we hear more in the next couple of weeks. See ya.